The number of cases and deaths in the United States continues to grow rapidly. How much longer will the situation continue to get worse before it gets better? President Donald Trump has been blaming China again for the spread of the coronavirus. We'll tell you about a major messaging campaign launched by the White House against Beijing, and later, Chinese Americans dealing with the fallout from the spread of the virus, with an alarming growth in the number of incidents of harassment and even attacks. What is to blame? Fear, racism, or a U.S. president who keeps using the term the Chinese coronavirus? Welcome to The Point, coming to you from Beijing. I'm Wang, sitting in for Liu Xin. The United States is fighting a tough war, but is it fighting in the right way? The country now has more than 35,000 cases across all 50 states, with 413 deaths by Monday, according to government statistics. A report by the Daily Beast revealed a major messaging campaign of the White House to focus on blaming China instead of on the virus itself. How and why is the White House trying to deflect blame? For more, I'm joined from D.C., Washington, D.C., by James Early, CEO of Stansberry, China, and via Skype by Wang Huiyao, President of the Center for China and Globalization in Beijing. James, let me start with you. Let's talk about, first of all, the virus containment, because after all, this is the most important thing. What's disturbing really is the rate of the increase, isn't it? From 2,000 new infections a day to over 4,000, and now around 8,000. I'm sure a lot of stories are out there that these numbers don't tell. What have you seen and heard on the ground, James?
Well, good to see you. I mean, obviously, I'm out here, in this alfresco office, partly because of the virus, so life here is definitely affected. But I will say the numbers are not as bad as they seem, in the sense that those rapid increases are partly because of better testing in the U.S., which is a good thing. We were pretty deficient for a number of reasons, which have been well publicized fairly. Pretty deficient in testing before, and now that we're testing more people, we are seeing more virus. But definitely, it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's for sure.
Well, what would you identify as the major challenges out there? Because I've talked to my friends in New York and Boston. They're telling me the situation is pretty dire. There's a lack of testing kits, of course, and there's also a lack of masks. Doctors, nurses reportedly were not wearing masks when they treat coronavirus patients. James.
Yeah, the testing and the masks are the big problem. The U.S. CDC at the beginning didn't follow WHO testing guidelines. They went their own way, and they paid the price for it, and that's very unfortunate. The mask, ironically, it wasn't but a month and a half ago that my son and I were buying all the masks we could here and mailing them to China. Now we don't have any, and just the other day I got a box of masks from a Chinese friend. So I guess the energy goes both ways here. But yeah, the masks are the big need, and I'm working to try to find Chinese suppliers, ironically, for U.S. hospitals and other healthcare facilities who are putting a call out, urgent calls out for masks and more personal protective equipment.
Well, President Wang, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence told reporters on Sunday that over 250,000 Americans have been tested. That is an increase from the previous days and weeks. Do you think that the more of testing explains the rapid increase in new cases across America? What are some of the other challenges?
Well, absolutely. I think that, the testing is just one side, because I think it was probably one of the reasons that there was a kind of a relaxed on the U.S. government side at the beginning, that they don't think this is really a serious threat to U.S. public health. And now they come to the situation now with the testing increase. But still, I think that it's still catching up game is doing now, and there's a lot of people to be tested, and then the backlog could be even larger. So I assume that with the testing technology and the skills and the test kits are more available, and also the U.S. has designed new testing methodology for that. So if that is really coming up with 340 million people, this is going to be really a great discovery as well. I'm sure there are going to be more cases because of U.S. is like New York. Is 30–40% of New Yorkers are coming from all over the world, migrants as well. So there are big interchanges with the world. So I think this is really very dangerous.
So President Wang, in your opinion, what can the experiences of China and other countries who have largely contained the outbreak, inform and enlighten and help our American friends on the other side of the Pacific Ocean? Because they are really fighting a tough battle.
Yes, it's really important. I think when we're facing the common threat of the mankind, and then which is a pandemic, no country is a single island. It's cannot separate from each other. So we have to really help each other. I think what can be probably benefit from China experience is that, for example, China has used this temporary hospital, turning the stadium exhibition center into a temporary hospital. So that really can be really a quick way to identify and separate, quarantine all those suspected cases. China could share the drawings, could share the specs, could share the construction methodology for those things. That's one thing. The other thing is, I think, is also the neighborhood, community that we should really have this kind of, really quarantine people that if they are in risk, and also have the controlled epidemics that WHO has recommended the methodology to do that. So that's the other thing. Thirdly, I think there has to be a really great coordination between federal and the state government. Whereas China did that. China mobilized all 31 provinces to send all the medical teams across to Wuhan, to the epicenter. So probably the U.S. could do that too. If they have a spare medical staff in other states, they should come to New York, to California, or Washington for the rescue. So I think there's a lot of coordination on both federal and the state government side to help combat this virus.
Well, gentlemen, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about a latest revelation on premeditated messaging campaign that is according to the Daily Beast, a very popular U.S. website and news service. The news service alleges that the White House is trying to blame China for America's inability to contain the virus. The technique, the strategy they're using is to divert attention to blaming China. The Daily Beast quoted two unnamed White House officials and the U.S. government cable directing relevant agencies in the U.S. to follow the same talking points. One official was quoted as saying, "Everything is about China. We're being told to try and get this messaging out in any way possible, including press conferences and television appearances." James, does this come out as a surprise to you at all? What's the calculation really behind
it certainly sounds ugly. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know how confirmed this story is, but it certainly sounds very ugly, and it's certainly not the right direction for either country. I will say this, that I think in the interest of accurate reporting the story, a lot of this is not simply politically motivated in terms of Trump's reelection. That may be a piece of it, but the other thing to mention is, the Chinese Foreign Ministry's campaign to insinuate, or at least partially, potentially blame the virus on the U.S. Army, and doubting the origin of the virus. I think that was a mistake. I think China should have left well enough alone. They had a great response to the virus and really calmed it down quickly. But this idea of trying to bring in the U.S. Army really undermined Chinese credibility. And I say that not as an American, but just as a PR analyst. Trump's response is also not helpful at all, using Chinese virus, pushing this China idea. That doesn't help anybody, and that discredits a lot of the very hardworking Chinese people who have done a lot to contain the virus. So I think it's gotten ugly. Yes, it's gotten ugly on both sides.
Well, President Wang, what do you think? What do you think are the calculations behind White House's messaging campaign against China, if those reports turn out to be true?
Well, I think that's, really, we should really leave that to WHO as well. But basically, WHO said we should not label those to any countries. We really haven't found out where's the source of this virus comes from. And, that could be, we need the scientific community to come to the final conclusion of that. So it's too early to say that. So I think, but it really, I mean, the U.S., if President labeled this as a China virus, a Wuhan virus, it's not fair to China as well. I think probably both sides should constrain from doing that. Particularly, we are now facing this danger of a spread of the pandemic of this virus, and also we are facing economic slowing down and even recession. That's probably the most important thing that we need to really focus on. Looking forward, how we can. As the two largest economy in the world, how as the two big country that all suffer this big virus, how can we, join hands and with the rest of the world to combat this disease? And U.S. and China have the most advanced technology, and particularly also China has experience of combat this disease. So I think we really should, looking forward, and then fighting for this virus together.
Certainly, you would think that the coronavirus would bring the two countries, the two largest economies, closer together. But unfortunately, that's not precisely the case. President Trump recently said, as early as last Saturday actually, that he wishes that the Chinese side could have told the U.S. earlier about what was going on inside China during a briefing on the federal government's coronavirus response. He also, said that, but the fact is, he was saying that China was doing a very good job, a very professional job just weeks ago. James, why do you think the president seems like he's contradicting himself, and contradicting himself now when the outbreak was just getting out of control in the States?
Well, I mean, we all know what Trump says may change from week to week, and that's just how he is. I do think he's upset about this idea of blaming the U.S. or doubting the origins of the virus. I don't think he's handling that upsetness well. But let me say one thing. I think it's the underreported story here, that a lot of Americans have taken the initiative to prepare for the virus by themselves, whether personally or businesses. My son's school is online. His Taekwondo lessons are online. That's not mandated by the government. That's done by the American people, and it's done largely because they've been watching China respond. They've seen the success that China has had. They said, hey, that worked. We're going to do the same without waiting for somebody to force us. So I would say there has been some positive contribution China has made to not just the world, but to the U.S. specifically, and it's not connected to the government at all.
Well, President Wang, China's foreign ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying said on Twitter recently, responding to the U.S. officials, that on January the 25th, President Trump tweeted to appreciate and thank China's efforts and transparency. The same day, U.S. State Department started to withdraw its consulate in Wuhan on February the 2nd. The travel ban was applied to China. What have you done since then? Scapegoating China does not help. Your final thoughts on this ongoing war of words, and really what China and the U.S. can do together to combat this disease?
Yeah, I think it's not wise. I think President Trump is conflicted himself quite a few times. I mean, China didn't really respond very slow. It takes time for China to diagnose and also getting all the WHO, all the experts' opinion to finally, really make an announcement on that. So China was actually quick enough to do that, and China has quickly taken swift actions and closed down a 10 million people city and 60 million province of Hubei, and then stopped all the cities from people interact with each other. So China has actually, once they realized the problem, they have done very swiftly. And then, the result tells the truth of that. China has quickly contained the situation. So I think it's not necessary to blame, where it went wrong. Actually, China saved the rest of the world in 1 month, 2 months' time. So U.S. should, the whole world should really appreciate that China has made a big sacrifice to really take a first hack on this and then share a lot of experience. So what I think is really important is that the U.S. and China should really get together now, being a two largest economy, to be responsible to the rest of the world, and working with United Nations, WHO, and all the international agencies to really have G20 summit to really work on this and how to combat the disease rather than blame each other. So that's not really good. I found that we have no time. We have really facing a slowing down economy, even crash of the economy. We are really facing a danger that we haven't seen in hundreds of years. So this is really no time to argue. I think we should really put our act together and get to work together. And this is the really good chance that we have to fight together for the common threat.
Getting together to fight the virus sounds good to me. I want to thank my guest, James Early from Stansberry, China in Washington, D.C., and also Wang Huiyao, President from Center for China and Globalization in Beijing. Thank you so much.